so nice to see all of you. Thank you for being here. My name is Ruby T, and I'm the curator of museum education here at PAAM. Welcome to the Fredi, Schiff, Levin lecture series, our first one of the season. This series is graciously sponsored by the Levin family. Now in its 21st season, the lecture series honors Fredi, Schiff, Levin's legacy as a member of the Provincetown arts community by inviting artists, curators, authors, and scholars to speak at PAAM. We are grateful to the Levin family for their continued support of this annual program. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we welcome Sky Power. In celebration of her exhibition, Beckoning Color, now open in the Duffy Gallery, curated by our CEO, Christine McCarthy. Woo! Sky Power is a contemporary painter based in Provincetown. Her emotion-driven, colorful abstractions and dreamscapes are driven by strong composition and color as form, created in the language of abstraction. Influenced by three Hans Hofmann students, Resika, Selina Trieff, and Robert Henry, Power's paintings seek to show the connection between representational and abstract art through composition. Tonight, Sky is going to be sharing a presentation of her work spanning from 1972 to 2022, after which she will be joined in conversation by exhibition curator and PAAM CEO Chris McCarthy, and we will follow this conversation with a Q&A, after which we invite you to spend some time with Sky's exhibition in the Duffy Gallery. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris McCarthy to share a few more words on Sky and her work.
Thank you, Ruby. Welcome, everybody. I guess this means it's really season now that this is the first lecture, and I heard someone say they couldn't find any parking, so I guess this is it. It was a real pleasure to curate the show with Sky, and without Sky's help and graciousness in being so organized, it never would have been as easy as it was. I mean, it wasn't easy, but as pleasurable as it was. How's that? Sky had everything cataloged, everything was digitized, and everything I needed, it was at my fingertips, literally. And it was really, for me, looking at this continuum of the earliest piece from 1972 to the present, what was remarkable to me is that there are still some of the same palette, brush marks, tone, rhythm that has spanned decades. And for someone who works in series, it's always interesting to me to see what an artist takes from one series and moves into the next and moves into the next. But for those of us who are lucky enough to live here, you actually can experience what Sky has created through mood and weather and light. And it's an explosion of color in that space. And I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. I was really thrilled with being able to move those pieces around in there and let them talk to each other. They basically told me where they wanted to be. And, you know, that's kind of par for the course for Sky, too. And it's been, you know, I've known Sky since I moved here. This is my 23rd summer here, 22 years. And watching Sky's progression over the last 20 years has been an incredible process. But I'm so proud of you, Sky. This is way overdue. You deserve this more than anyone. And it's been such a great honor to work with you. And so now why don't we let everybody know a little bit more about how you make these incredible paintings, and then we'll have a conversation and open it up for questions. Take it away, Sky. One more thing. We did this really fabulous catalog too, and if you don't have it, it is for sale in the shop, and it's really, really beautiful. There's great essays in here by John Yao and Susan Rand Brown, and Jean Wilcox designed this, and it lives on much later than the exhibition, so I would encourage you all to get one of these because it's really worth having this in your collection of books. Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Hi, it is good to see all of you here tonight, even though I have on my close-up glasses and I cannot see your expressions. Just keep that in mind. I am honored to have my paintings hanging in the Duffy Family Gallery of the Provincetown Art Association and Museum, and grateful that the CEO, Christine McCarthy, wanted to curate this exhibition. Thank you, Chris, for your curatorial excellence and beautiful installation design. It has been a pleasure to work with you on the exhibition and the catalog. So can everyone hear me okay? In this slideshow, I am focusing on the connections between the paintings in the exhibition, sharing some of my painting processes, and pointing out signature characteristics of my work. These 25 paintings range from 1972 to 2022. I want to start off with the mixed media triptych that is like no other work in this show. The middle passage, view from the ship's hull, 2002. As a woodworker, this was my swan song. The middle passage was the longest and most dangerous of the slave trading routes between Europe, Africa, and the Americas between the years 1619 and 1820. Each panel depicts the only view of the outside world a slave would have seen from the ship's hull: sunset or dawn, midnight, and midday seen through the grate on deck. The triptych is an attempt to bring awareness to the inhumanity that continues as a result of racism, sexism, and misplaced ideologies. In 1997, I watched the historical drama film Amistad, depicting Africans who had been illegally kidnapped in 1839 from their homes in Sierra Leone to be sold as slaves in the Americas. That same year, the United States condemned importation of slaves but defended slavery. In the transatlantic slave trade route, the Middle Passage was notorious for its brutality. The Africans were chained together in the repurposed cargo hold, or hull, of a slave ship for roughly 80 days in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions and oppressive heat. They were packed so tightly into tiers that the ceilings did not permit them to sit upright. In the film, a square wooden grate on the deck served as the entry and exit to the hull. Being a woodworker, I knew that I could recreate the image of the grid using the hardwood paduk from Malaysia. I used a stack of dado blades to cut out precise areas of the wood so that the horizontal and vertical strips were flush when they fit together. Behind each wooden grid, I installed a painted panel depicting the time of day or night. The grid has been a continuous theme in my artwork since the 90s. For 3 years, 1999 through 2002, I created a series of 50 paintings on 2-foot by 2-foot panels called ikage. Ikage is an Apache word for shield or protector. These paintings focused on a central form and a square format to depict shields. In Ikage 28, created 2 years before the Middle Passage, I painted a white grid over the deep blue form using oil paints. In other paintings in that series, I depicted grids using delicate colored pencil work juxtaposed with bold, free brush strokes of blue-black on panels. For the next few years, I worked on 2 other series, Talking Leaves and Self with Other. Talking Leaves is how the Cherokee refer to their alphabet. The Talking Leaves series represents unspoken communication, the foundation of abstract art. The carmine palette of these lyrical paintings is characteristic of fire, the central symbol of the Cherokee people, because of their belief that fire can see into the heart. The Self and Other series combines the element of the abstract with the identifiable form of a human seeking to understand what it means to be in relation to another. To embrace or to let go of another is an act of courage that defines our human condition. Self-allowing other to enter is lyrical in nature, like Talking Leaves number 6, and also possesses the markings that I call my iconography, as seen in the clothing and the background. You can see larger versions of these blue markings in the abstract painting, A Poem of Fire and Water from 2014. My internal world that has no limits in an abstracted form, I have dreamt I was swimming in between the layers of my paint. In the earliest painting in this show, Waking Up from 1972, is also a pure abstraction. This painting is part of a series of abstractions using acrylics and oil crayon on illustration board. Fortunately, I saved one for me. It was brought to my attention that the brown markings in Waking Up are similar to the markings in Our Changing Climate, painted nearly 50 years ago. Others mentioned that the iconography or markings in Our Changing Climate look like the Amazon symbol in reverse. Very unconscious on my part. I follow my instincts when I paint. I do not question an idea. I paint the idea, analyze it later, then keep it, paint it out, or use parts of it as underpainting. Our Changing Climate has a horizon, as do most of my paintings. In 2021, during the pandemic, I introduced storytelling into my work as seen in the house floating in the moving water and with the fires and the drought in the background. Duet, points of vision, and solace also have horizons, including markings too. Duet 2022, I introduced charcoal markings on top of the oil painting to create more definition along the horizon. In Points of Vision 2004, painting with acrylics, I made iconographic markings in various colors using medium-sized rounded paint brushes, let it dry, then painted a solid layer of color over the entire surface. After it dried, I used my palm sander to reveal the markings under this new layer of color. Because the bristles of the paintbrush connect to the surface at different levels, the layer of paint on top of the dried brush strokes reveal how the paint cools between the bristle impressions. The intriguing markings are revealed after it has been sanded. For the purpose of defining the inclined horizon of this painting, I applied many thin layers of white above the horizon, which allowed the subtle colors underneath to glow through the white. Then, using a small piece of fine sandpaper, I lightly sanded through the white paint on top of the raised areas from the brush strokes to reveal specific color markings underneath the white in the sky. I also depicted a moon in the top left corner using precise colored pencil application on top of the white layer. Because I was working on the hard surface of a panel, I could do the delicate pencil work and use a palm sander. It takes me approximately a half hour to create a square inch of precise colored pencil shading. In Solace 2006, the markings expanded into the form of drips, inspired by Selina Trieff's paintings. This is not a plein-air painting, but is the abstracted image of a view that I absorbed many times from the top floor of a home. In Taming the Fire 2004, I painted bold red acrylic brush strokes with a 2.5-inch brush on a 4-foot by 4-foot square panel. After that layer dried, I chiseled out the red shape by canceling out areas of red with white paint, leaving in the previous strips as markings. The sea is the horizon. In abstract art, as we are finding and creating our own structures, As we are in abstract art, we are finding and creating our own structures. As painters, we develop our forms with line, color, and empty spaces. Any additions or subtractions change the whole equation of the composition. Fire Within 2011 is pure abstraction with an emphasis on two values of yellow together. I consider myself a colorist. Working with color is the most exciting element of painting for me. Still Life in the Dunes, 2013, developed into an abstracted still life because of the relationship of the color forms. I saw flowers and leaves and dunes and added imagery to emphasize that scene. Interior of a Landscape, 2007, is what I call a dreamscape. There's a horizon and the sky. The bottom half looks like it could be a boat in the water, depicting the Provincetown seascape that I have been surrounded by for over 40 years. I also see the landscape where I grew up below the Cap Rock in West Texas. Even though the compass of my work is internal, I'm very influenced by my environment. This painting is in the permanent collection of PAAM. Anchored by the Sea, 2008, was pure abstraction until I decided the drip was an anchor from the clouds to the sea. There was a conscious effort to depict the two values of yellow leading to orange, juxtaposed with complementary violet hues. The color of the soft light gray below the orange sea was needed to balance the vivid yellows and orange hues. Beyond the Horizon 2009 originated in the Self and Other series. You might can see areas of the upside down, oval, abstracted heads with noses, mouths, and eyebrows along the horizon. When I originally gessoed the panel, I added color to the gesso and drew the heads with a sharpened dowel I drew the heads with a sharpened dowel into the wet gesso to create a texture. It never manifested into the Self and Other series. Instead, I turned it upside down and made it for great underpainting for the landscape with the horizon, using the horizontal and vertical drips as markings. This painting was included in the Tides of Provincetown traveling exhibition from 2011 to 2012. Clearwater 2009 was an inspiration with the electrified colors for the sky, land, and sea, and drips for markings. I did not question any of it. Going deep inside of myself and trusting is an essential part of my process. Because I am painting layers of wet on drops of dry oils, if I do not like the current color form that I'm working on, I can wipe it off or leave a beautiful, soft residue behind. Okay, making sure I didn't leave something. In Shelter 2, 2022, I started with the pink form that became the sky. After it dried, I painted orange in the foreground. Then I painted structures along the horizon, forms in the sky, a layer of blue above, then pressed my palette with white paint on the bottom half of the panel. Other layers of colors were painted, removed, or areas left as residue. These are oils, so each form or layer has to dry before I paint more. Every color form in the Warming Sun 2017 was a separate painting session. When I attain a form of color that I want to keep, I set the painting aside until it dries before I continue painting. The same as every other painting, I initially paint with free abandon, began analyzing all of my next moves. I instinctually moved through the composition like an animal in a landscape. The Flats High Noon 2020 was all painted with a 2.5-inch brush on 11 by 14 panel, 1 color per session. In painting The Gift 2016, other than working with color forms, lines, and empty spaces to attain a strong composition, I did not understand the significance of the painting until it was finished. It is an abstracted story about a life-altering accident. In the bottom right corner, you can see the red tilted cup overflowing. But in the center, an orange cup is perfectly balanced on a precise line with a beautiful droplet hanging from it. Because I was able to grow from that experience, it was a gift. Transformation 2020 also has a balanced cup in the painting with a small grid and a butterfly resting near the chrysalis that it just crawled out of. The cup is imprinted with colored drawings that mirror the drawing below it. This is a painting of joy and balance for me, and more storytelling. I did not know what I was going to paint when I started. The idea of one representational image after another emerged until the story of transformation was revealed. Am I giving you all enough time to look at them? Good. In the Poet's Train 2012, I created color forms that I grew attached to, but did not know how to tie them together to create a strong painting. It took months of sitting with the painting, in between working on others, and eventually I saw a train traveling over the Bridge of Drips and moving up towards the clouds. I named it the Poet's Train because of the metaphor. 9 years later, a close friend, the poet Richard McCann, died, and another friend suggested that I gift the painting to PAAM in memory of him, which I did. A Dream of a Dream 2013 was painted the same year with the same challenge: how to keep the exciting color forms yet create a strong painting. I set this painting aside for a year before I figured out that resting an egg on the horizon on the lower form, in between the upper form, would create the stability and intrigue that the painting needed. It helps me to solve the puzzle by rotating the painting, viewing it in a mirror, or as a thumb-sized digital. Even though I have included geometric or representational forms in my abstract paintings, in 2018 I decided I wanted more structure in my work. Breakwater started off with bold brushstrokes using a 2.5-inch brush on an 11 by 14-inch panel. At that point, when I saw the blue-violet brushstrokes as water splashing, I focused on creating a breakwater as geometric color forms using a fine, small brush. I imagined the breakwater in the west end of Provincetown with the Provincetown Inn in the background. In 2021, I started off my process by creating a color form in one half of the painting. After it dried, I painted another color in relation to it on the other half, also using a 2.5-inch brush. Then I painted a square grid of colors on the horizon, a much harder task than I realized. I liked the image, but after viewing it as a thumbnail, I decided it was not strong enough. I turned the painting upside down, then spent the next 3 weeks painting small geometric forms along the horizon in the shape of a breakwater, submerging the lower half of the rocks in the Violet Bay on an 11 by 14-inch panel. This painting is called Breakwater 2, not included in this exhibition. The first rendition that I initially painted was named The Zen View. In 2022, I wanted to continue with the idea of focused structure combined with bold brushstrokes, but on a larger format, 24 by 30 compared to 11 by 14. Last Quarter Moon is not in this exhibition, but is in my show at Berta Walker Gallery that opens tomorrow. The reception is from 5 to 7. I wanted to go a little further than the painting of the breakwater to show you where I have moved on since. Thank you for coming tonight.
So one of the things I noticed when I was, that you do have drips that go up and not down. So talk a little bit more about the idea of flipping paintings around and how you realize that something looks better, not the way you intended it to begin.
Well, it's not about, not in the way, oh, you mean because I changed that painting so much?
Well, a couple of them have upside down drips, which made me believe that they had at one point been this way, but then they ended up that way.
Well, but it's not about how I intended it to be, it's about where I'm going with it. And it's how to complete a strong painting in the end. So as I'm painting, I will turn it every which way. I'll go into my bathroom that's off of my studio and I'll look in the mirror and see it from the mirror, and I can solve problems that way. And actually, one of my best solutions is to take a digital of the painting and look at it as a small thumbnail image, and I can see what the problems are and what I need to change. So I know which one you're speaking of. You're talking about Beyond the Landscape that has vertical and horizontal drips in it. And at one point I made vertical drips, but I also came back later and made I made the horizontal drip first and then the vertical next. It was just part of the painting process, that's all. Because I'm always trying to create structure and color forms that work with one another, and I need the markings too to keep it of interest.
Yeah, I like, because when I was laying out the show, in some instances I turned the paintings upside down too, just to see kind of.
Yes.
And I get that, because that's the beauty of abstraction too. Sometimes if you're looking for balance and if you're looking for depth, being able to do that, or painting something on the floor and painting it from every which angle also works to your benefit, I think.
Yes, and I want to say one more thing about that painting, which is that at one point I thought it was complete. And so I have a rubber stamp that's the symbol of heaven or the sky, and then I did a stylized version of the Chinese symbol. And so so when I am finished, I always stamp the painting, and then I stamp the back too, and sign it. And so I had stamped this painting thinking that was the direction it was that I wanted, and I changed my mind. Did you see that other stamp up in the... I love that. That's great. You're so astute.
That's why I'm asking.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to paint over that, you know, because with the stamps, they're just as important as any other element in the painting. So I spend quite a bit of time deciding where I'm going to place the stamp, what color it's going to be, and fortunately painting in oils, if I don't like what I stamp, I can move it off very quickly and make sure I dry off any kind of mineral spirit or Gamsol and get it back to the way it was before and then start again. But the other thing I do with the stamp is on blank white paper. I mix up the color and then I start stamping on the paper to see if that's the color I want. And then I put it up, put it under the corner of the painting, and then I can view where it's going to be. And so, I thought long and hard about that stamp. That ended up not being the same direction.
Right. Well, I was curious because there is a method to what you do, and when you see something that's out of the norm, it raises the flag.
I always wondered if anybody would notice that.
Do people have questions that we can go ahead?
Thank you, Scott. It really is intriguing. You talked about taking a painting and then sanding it back to get the foreground colors, and I'm going through my mind and thinking how that would work. Can you describe that a little bit? Sanding it, sanding off the white.
Okay, so you're going to get to someone hit the microphone, right? She's going to give you a microphone because I honestly didn't quite get all that.
Can you hear that? Is that okay?
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You talked a little bit about how you would create a layout, and then you would sand it back and capture the previous layers of color. And I'm thinking about how that works, and I'm just wondering how you do it without erasing everything.
Some gets erased. And I have actually left, in some paintings, and they were in the Akaji series, I've left it down to the masonite in areas because I like that brown. I have an Akaji painting that was painted in acrylic, and I use very dense pigment in that one. And so as I am sanding areas away, and that doesn't mean I don't go back over it and paint it, but as I'm sanding areas away, I realized that the painting that area was so dense that I took a knife and I gouged off that thick pigment, many pieces, tore them, set them aside. And then with the palm sander, I sanded the edges, very, very clean, smooth, so that nothing's going to roll up. And then I painted that particular masonite area. I painted it with gesso again, and then put a square in the middle. And I put that square over areas of the pieces of the pigment that had stayed, which made it even more interesting. So you see some of that blue color coming through, and then there's the white square and then the yellow background. And at the end of the painting, I took the most interesting piece that I had torn off of it, which was also shaped almost like a tornado, of course, being from West Texas. But it's a sky blue, like you saw in the middle passage, and then the very tip is like a cadmium yellow. And what I did was I flattened it for quite a while, for a long time, probably weeks in a book, and books on top of the book. And then I put the high glue behind it, and every day I would just keep pressing it, until it was there. So that painting is in fact also a collage, but a collage of pigment, which makes it so interesting. But in the one I was describing in there, so I had I either had white gesso or I had a color down already. And then I took the medium-sized round bristle brush, And I would do different colors of iconography, what I call my iconography, the shapes. And then after they were all dried, then I took a cadmium yellow on top of all of them. Oh no, I did not put white. This is this one. I put white on top of all of them. And then I just started sanding. And what happens is that because the bristles land on the, are pressed onto the surface differently, when you sand over those raised bristles, then that color that is being sanded off pools down into the bristles because they're up on a higher edge slightly. And then you'll have some of the marks of the bristles in it, which creates very interesting markings. So if I've sanded off too much, I can add more color, if that's your question. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So I know that, the majority of that exhibition is very abstract, yet the elements like the train and the butterfly are so real.
Yes.
Have you ever painted very realistically?
Absolutely. Yes.
When? Like,
Well, let's see. As a child, I had lessons, private lessons. My older sister and I did with our peers from a woman in town who was an artist. And what she did was she taught us about perspective and how to paint with oil paints. And she would put up images that she took out of magazines from the old masters, and we'd have to copy them. So that's more like copying, but I also like to do very intricate graphic, so to speak, work, whether it's pencil or painting, as you saw of the butterfly, of very representational images. And then for years I drew and painted figures. And I have one abstract painting that literally has a hand in it, that much of it. It's just sort of floating in the middle. But there's much else going on. And when I was in the middle of the painting, I thought, ooh, I'm going to put a hand there. And that's what I was talking about. I just act on my, what comes out. I mean, it doesn't have to stay. But, why not do it? What am I going to do, talk myself out of it? So I painted this hand in there and made it almost like it was a mannequin, because I cut it off here, and then there was an oval at the end of it. So, it would be like more of a mechanical element to it, though the hand was very realistic, and it was mine. And I'm trying to think what year that was. I think it was 2007 or 11. And then years later, that's when I had the accident, and it was that exact part of my hand that was affected. So it made sense to me later on why I thought earlier to put that in there.
all right, don't put any more body parts in your painting. Roxy?
Thank you. That was so beautiful, Sky. I read from somebody who said that you have a really winning combination of rapture and restraint. And I was thinking about oppositions in your work and process, the relationship between abstraction and structure, storytelling, story receiving, and you're kind of going down a path of talking about the relationship between control and lack of control. And that seems pretty obvious, but I'm wondering if you could describe a moment or process when something is given to you or you receive it, and what is the relationship between control and lack of control, and maybe if you have examples, that would be interesting.
So this is my sister, everybody, Roxy. I see it as elements of my nature. And I also see it as the duality, I also see it as the duality of man as humankind. In other words, I'm not unique. We all have oppositions in us. So that's why I have the need to do very exacting woodwork like I did in the middle passage, the intricate pencil shading that looks like airbrush, the very intricate painted butterfly in there. But I also have the need to do, the freedom of the bold brush strokes. And I don't call that out of control, Roxy. I'm trying to think what I do. I call it free abandon. So when I'm teaching, I have a course I teach called Abstractions Form. And I refer to that initial freedom as, those initial bold strokes as free abandon. So what I do when I go into the studio, first of all, I'm generally working on at least 15 paintings at the same time, because if I create a color form that I'm attached to and like, I'm going to set the painting aside. I don't want muddy colors, and I don't want to lose this this form that I'm excited by. And so if I have color mixed up already, I'll look around at the paintings and see if I can see where I could put that color, or see if I could create another color with it by adding, another pigment to it and apply it somewhere. But I'm not just going to put it somewhere just to use it up. So if I can't find a place for the pigment that I've already mixed up, and I usually mix up a big batch because I use a 2.5-inch brush, and I often paint on large canvases, and so I want to have plenty of paint to work with to create the forms. And if I don't, if I can't find a place to apply that pigment, then I'll pull out a new canvas and start again. And then I'll start with the free abandon of creating an exciting form. If I don't like any of the forms I've created, then I'm going to wipe them away. But usually I'll leave some of the residue along with the deeper pigment, which are of interest. So minimally, I'm always going to have interesting underpainting in the work, which I want to have. And I try to keep it there, but I'm not going to keep anything in the painting that's going to mean that I'm going to put out a piece of work that's mediocre and not strong. So I've heard from other artists that the attachment to those areas that we like, they call them our little darlings. And so, as I mentioned in the Poet's Train and A Dream and a Dream, I was trying very hard to keep those color forms I had worked so hard to create, layers on top of the layers. And so it meant I waited for, months, at least a year, and one of them to come up with the solution so that I could keep those little darlings, basically. Great.
I love what you were saying about abandoned versus out of control. And in that respect, I was wondering what the markings, I've never heard the term before, and I was wondering, are the markings intentional? That's the best word I can think of. Or do they arise too in some sort of abandon? Because they seem, the use of the markings to me, as a person who just doesn't know that much about the process itself, they seem deliberate and anchoring. And I'm wondering, is
deliberate and what?
Anchoring.
Okay, good. I thought you said angering.
How do those arise in you?
The
markings.
Okay.
Where to place them and how you decide that?
Okay. Well, first of all, the splatters are not deliberate.
Right.
And generally I love them, and I always keep them. So in Taming the Fire, when I was deliberately chiseling out areas to make white on top of the bold red strokes, I painted around those little drips because I wanted to keep them in there. But I will fill a brush sometimes, it's called loading. I'll load the brush with pigment and Gamsol, a mineral spirit, the right combination. There's the right balance there. And I learned this from Selina Trieff. You press it up against the canvas and just move your brush over, and the drips come down. Those are deliberate markings. And self and other, or self-allowing other to enter, that one where I was pointing out the markings on the clothes and in the background, those were very deliberate. I had a paintbrush and I'm making marks.
I have a question. Knowing.
Hang on one sec, we're gonna give you a mic, just so that we can.
Can't hear people. Thank you. Knowing your attention to detail and how plain you are there, and your personality. I'm your neighbor, so I know personality goes to one. Do you actually feel, or can you explain how you go from like the abandonment in the background and all of a sudden you come up with that beautiful butterfly or that beautiful detailed train or even the gift? Like, do you actually feel something inside that changes in you, that you go from something so abstract to something so detailed?
No, I do it because the painting needs it.
Do you actually feel that inside, or? I don't know if I'm explaining.
I feel all of it, if that's helpful.
Something changes in you, or something detailed there, or I don't know how to explain it.
Well, first of all, it's not happening all at the same moment. In other words, when I paint any form that I like, I'm painting in oils and I'm setting it aside to dry. And before I make the next gesture or layer, before I paint anything else on that painting, it has to be dry, and then I'll sit and think about it. I may see something right away that I want to do, or it may take quite a while, but I'm not in the same state that in any of the times that I'm painting. And I like the combinations of the intricate work with the bold, free work. So,
Yeah, I love those. And I was just curious, because one side of it to me is like so carefree and so flowing, and I'm just looking at that, that's there. But then I see the detail in that butterfly specifically, and being someone who isn't really attentive myself, I know how detail oriented I can get doing certain things. And I was just wondering how you felt like your energy changed, going from a carefree to all of a sudden like, no, I need this, there.
well, but this will be a good one to talk about. I mean, you can see below, those were very free strokes. But then I started structurizing them. I guess that's the best way to put it. Turning them into structured form. And that would be by adding the white below, or adding the white above to create the pointed peaks. The right-hand corner, that was very free. I had a yellow background. There was a yellow background down here too, but I put white in there. In fact, the whole thing had a yellow background. I painted very freely in yellow up to where the white is on the upper top. I don't always cover the whole thing. I'm creating color forms, however big they are. And so with all of that yellow, I came along and created dark blue strokes and forms below. I created silver gray above on the yellow. The yellow continued over with the white between the dark blue and the other free form above. I was structuring that out. I wanted to make it look like a window or a view, you know. But above it, where there's the last quarter moon, I spent a long time figuring out. I mean, there are so many layers of paint in that, you wouldn't believe it. How to structure that to make it work. It was definitely a challenge, and I like a challenge. But that whole upper left-hand corner, but especially in that central tight area, was complex and took a long time. And then above, I wanted that to be, I wanted to have have it feel like free stroke, you know, more loose strokes. But I wanted to, and also to look like the midnight sky coming through the clouds, because that's, you know, a half-quarter moon. So it's all an abstracted idea.
Here, go. Megan, we'll get you next.
Thank you, Sky, for that. I have a question in my mind. I'm thinking about how you clarify how you use your signatures. You take a piece of white paper on your signature stamp, and then you lay out different colors, right?
I start off with one color.
Oh,
I start with one color and I stamp it and until I get the right mixture. And then I go put it up to the painting to see if it's the color that I think is going to work.
Yeah.
And if it is, I'll use it. But then I'll start mixing again, stamping. So you're right. It could be more colors.
Do you have, when you approach your painting, do you sketch it all? Do you just go to it with one-on-one relationship?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I have sketched in the past, but I haven't sketched in a long time, and I'm not interested in it.
Okay, that's not that process because.
Well, I mean, if I need to paint something representationally, yes, I will need to sketch. But I'm not doing that.
But that's the purpose why you put things aside, in addition to drying, that you put things aside, you put the painting aside, and then you go back to it, and then you understand it, what to do next, correct?
Eventually I do, yes. I may know right away too. I may have finished, one color that needs to dry and know what I want to do next, and it's like, too bad. So what I do then, because, every day is another day, I'll write it down. I make notes and I make little drawings of ideas I have so I don't lose them. And I'll also write down color combinations of different pigments together and different pigments on top of other pigments, because it's amazing how different a pigment is if it's just sitting beside one color or next to another color or on top of another one. It's all very different.
Thank you.
And it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
We'll get there, Megan, hold on. We'll get one here and then back to you. Go ahead.
Sky, thank you very much, and you're also a great teacher. So I took your class last year, it was great. I just had a question about the business of the process in a painting. I understand you work on a lot of different paintings at the same time, but do you ever is there a kind of a rhythm to, like I'm thinking about the way that I think it's Hans Hofmann sort of talks about how, the painting gets more and more complicated, or drawing or anything. As you make the marks, there's less and less choice. You've made a mark and you like it, and but it's not finished. So you have to finish it. So that's a sort of a problem. Do you feel that the paintings get sort of more and more difficult, and then suddenly you know that it's going to work? Or, in other words, do you ever sort of just completely abandon something and start again and paint over it? Or do you sort of continue with the challenge of painting and then putting another colour on and then realising it's not finished, but how am I going to finish it?
Well, I have set things aside for 6 months, a year, even years, because I don't know how to move forward.
And really not painted on them at all?
Well, not if I can't figure out what to do, and then after a certain amount of time that I'm not as attached and I'm freer, and I'll go back onto it with a free abandon approach. And I remember taking a course with Bob Henry in the back in his studio, and I was sort of telling Bob, how long I'd been thinking about this and doing that. He's like, oh no. But we're all individual, and we all have our approaches. But I've always remembered that, Bob, and I think about that when I can't move forward. And so it's nice to have, if I'm stuck, to be able to have a breakthrough and just let go. But I find the best way to let go is if I leave it alone for a while and focus on other paintings, then I'm more willing to take more chances again. Because I can get stuck in the analytical phase. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Megan.
These are just like a couple of friendly comment offerings instead of question. I've been looking at your work for a number of years, and I just want to comment about this infusion of realism into the color field. And that's what surprised me dramatically and with your work. And I think that's what takes the work beyond the Hofmann School into this 21st century hybridity that's really important and unique for your work and the legacy of Provincetown. And also...
What are you saying? Are you saying you like that?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Well,
that's a positive
but I want to say one thing. I'm not trying to stay with any kind of parameters. I'm always observing and learning and open. And I'm most open to me.
Yeah. And then I always assumed at looking at your work that these were done in one session, like an alla prima. And hearing you kind of taking the liberty to hold back after something's working instead of pushing forward, and when the destruction of painting sets in and then coming back later, I think maintains that freshness so well. And I think it's within that sort of intuitive process, there's this great intention that seals these paintings into like these beautiful realizations of things.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
I appreciate hearing that from you, because I like your work too.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have one more question for you, Sky.
Okay.
So in the middle passage, you said that was inspired by when you saw the movie Amistad. Mm-hmm. So whether it's the last quarter moon or a horizon, I've seen you walk at the beach before. So is it something that you see sometimes that just clicks and you're like, either it's a moon or a sun or a horizon or something that makes you, I need to paint this? Does that happen to you? Like what influences you to just go?
No, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
I'm not out there thinking, oh, I want to paint this or that. I feel like I absorb my environment and my experiences. And so when I'm painting, what I'm doing in that moment is I'm opening up. And it's really to a place of trust within myself. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm letting what flow. And what flows from me are my experiences and my feelings about my environment. So that's when the elements of what you're talking about, the sun or the moon, are coming out. And also it can be a form or a color that I need in that painting. I may need that half moon. But I do fall in love with the half moons out there. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so
yeah.
yes. So yes.
Yes.
So it's yes and no.
Good. I like that. I think that's a good answer. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, let's go into the exhibition. Thank you, Sky.